first three sessions have been quite vibrant, they have been quite insightful, and I hope all of you must have felt that this theme has been discussed threadbare. There is something more which we want to add. So we are in the last, final panel discussion, and this panel discussion is on water resources, challenges and prospects. This particular panel discussion is to be moderated by Dr. G. Balachandar from Krishi Bounty Biotech, Nandi Hills, Bangalore, India. So I would basically invite Dr. G. Balachandar to come onto this stage. Our next panelist is Dr. Julia Osterman from University of Gothenburg, Sweden. Our third panelist is Dr. Vamshi Krishna, National Institute of Technology, Warangal, Telangana. So our next panelist is Dr. Sunil Gurappu, National Institute of Hydrology, Roorkee. Next panelist, Dr. Shruti Singh from Sharda University, UP. And the last panelist in this panel discussion is Sri Khalid Jahangir, Chairman, ICPS, Sinman. Now Ms. Hanan from Department of Botany would introduce the panelists to the audience.
The white snowy glaciers reveal red earth, and the lush plants and trees have not even a single speck of. You wait under the tap for hours, desperate only to find the bounty of one drip. Your throat is so dehydrated that it becomes tender and sore. This is the worst scenario one could ever imagine without water. Though we are not living in a lifestyle like this, but the time is near if we continue to use water unwisely. Water, a vital resource for human survival and economic development, constitutes 70% of the planet Earth. It's very normal for us to think that water will always be plentiful. However, this is not the scenario. Fresh water, the stuff we drink, bathe in, irrigate our farm fields with, constitutes only a small percentage of the total water found on Earth, that is 3%. Out of this 3%, most of the water is stuck in the form of glaciers or unavailable for human use. According to a report by UNICEF, 771 million people do not have access to clean water, which means 1 out of every 10 individual does not have access to free water. 2.7 billion people around the world face water shortages for at least once a month in a year. These challenges have significant economic, social, and environmental impacts, and they require urgent action to ensure sustainable water management. The G20 signifies the importance of water management as a critical factor in sustainable development and global growth. With this agenda, I'd like to welcome all of you to the panel, Water Resource Challenges and Prospects. I am highly honored to introduce you the moderator of the session, Dr. G. Balachandar. Dr. G. Balachandar is a managing director at Krishi Bounty Biotech, Nandi Hills, Bangalore, India. He is currently working as a managing director at Krishi Bounty Biotech. He has significant experience at global, regional, and international levels. His forte is in bringing interdisciplinary perspectives to address challenges at the intersection of economy, ecology, and equality. I welcome Dr. G. Balachandar, and I request him to come on stage and introduce all the panelists. A big round of applause for Dr. G. Balachandar.
One thing I would add to the availability you said about fresh water being 2.5 or 3%, the actual utilization of that water, do you have an idea how much of it goes to agriculture, how much goes to industry, how much goes to household use? And you don't have to give me an answer, but just think of a number or numbers. Actually, on average across the globe, 70% goes for agriculture, 20% for industry, and 10% for household use. And again, this is not static. As economies develop, this will lead simultaneously to needing to improve our food security given population increases while reducing the amount of water needed for it. So this is a common refrain that people say, goal is to achieve universal and equitable access to safe water for all, and this is an aspirational goal. Now, whether we can achieve it, it all depends on all the governments, all the people, civil society, and multiple agencies. Another question for you, to wake you up. Water is a wicked problem. How many of you know, somebody asked about green hydrogen, how many of you know the term wicked problem? Just raise your hand. Wicked does not mean evil. I'll say that. Wicked is something where solutions are not easy. These are complex issues requiring multiple approaches, holistic approaches to addressing complex issues, and these keep changing. Circumstances change. Climate change is a wicked problem, and climate change impacts on water is quite well known. There's a significant reduction or increase in freshwater availability as a result of climate change. Some places like Siberia might become areas for wheat growing, while parts of India, parts of South Asia may be affected significantly by reduction in monsoon rains by 19 to 20%. Some of these are models. Clearly, we do not know. Before we come to the panelists, I would also like to add, severe shortages of water can lead to ecosystem degradation while increasing health and loss of livelihoods, worsening health. So water is at the heart of nutrition, health and food security, poverty alleviation, gender equity, youth and social inclusion, environmental health and biodiversity. So the basic, I think I would say, summary at this stage on water is, if there's no water, there's no food and no dinner. So you cannot even discuss anything on the dinner plate. So now we'll start off with the panelists, and how better to lead off this discussion on food security, even though we are talking about water. I just indicated, if there's no water, there's no food. Julia Osterman, she is German, but she's living in Sweden, and she works on pollinators and food security, how to increase food security. And I leave the rest of it to her, and we'll come back to the other panelists subsequently. Over to you, Julia.
Thank you very much for the introduction, and thank you very much for the lively discussion so far. I'm very amazed with all the questions and interactions I had so far. So yes, my name is Julia Osterman. I'm a researcher at Gothenburg University and member of the Gothenburg Global Biodiversity Center. So my
Thank you, Vamsi. The next panelist is Dr. Sunil Gurapu. He is a scientist at the National Institute of Hydrology, Roorkee. I guess you are a colleague of one of the persons we heard from IIT Roorkee earlier.
Yes.
So he specializes in hydrology, climate change, and hydrological extremes, extreme weather.
Very good afternoon to everyone. Thank you very much for the brief introduction, sir. Respected dignitaries and ladies and gentlemen, my name is Dr. Sunil Gurapu. I'm working as scientist at National Institute of Hydrology. I work in the field of impact of daily connections on hydrological extremes and regional hydrology. And so I'm working on climate change impacts on water availability and extremes. So since morning or from a very long time we have been talking about climate change, and someone in the first panel session has rightly said it's climate change is inevitable, and climate change is not something new. It has been happening from many millennia, from the past millennium. Although from the recent past, the change in climate has been intensified because of the increasing greenhouse gases from anthropogenic activities. So, because of the changes in climate in the prehistoric period, there have been extinction of species, extinction of civilizations, and most of these extinctions have occurred because of the hydrological extremes, which are floods, either due to floods or due to droughts, or inavailability of water or excess availability of water. So, what I'm trying to say in the future, because of the climate, projections are being made that there will be an increase in temperature, which is going to affect the precipitation patterns, and it might lead to extreme events. I have done some study using a prehistoric data set, thousand years of data which have been reconstructed from paleoclimatic data, which have shown that the extremes that we have seen in the recent 100 years is not as severe as it has occurred in the past 1,000 years. So the extreme events we are expecting in the future is nothing new to us. What can be done is we can adapt to the change in the climate, but adaptation is always not possible because there are some limitations to adaptability. So sustainable growth or sustainable development is very of water, control and management of construction works with respect to storage, conservation, irrigation, supply, flood control and prevention, improvement in the flow of water, improvement in the quality of water for human use are issues which are being looked into and we should also look into for future. These issues are being addressed to a certain extent, but the cumulative impact of measures taken by the previous governments is not yielding result which are making our water bodies in a dire
circumstances. And from that will follow that participatory decision making is critical and crucial for ownership. And it's not just mouthing, hey, okay, let's bring a panchayat here, a few women token members. No, this has to be genuine participatory decision making. Commons must be monitored. We build a new building, we cut the ribbons, and then it's not maintained. So in the same sense, monitoring is an essential element of managing the commons. Sanctions for those who violate on a graduated basis, and conflict resolution mechanisms must be easily accessible, because just as we say, the justice delayed is justice denied, here we need to have easy mechanisms, easily accessible mechanisms to address the issues that will arise. So, it seems a little esoteric when I talk about these things, but it applies very much to a common property resource, which is water. And water is very critical, very crucial, just like biodiversity. They are all linked. So I'll stop here and then see what kind of questions come up, and just like before, address who you are, very brief question, and then who it is to be addressed. Thank you.
There is an opinion and various studies that available water resource is enough to sustain the world population. Now my question is that should we treat it as a governance issue or issue of supply? Thank you.
I'll give you a specific example. When you talk about governance, I mean, that triggered something. In South India and Tamil Nadu, there used to be neer kattis. Neer kattis, maybe Prasidi knows that, or her father knows if he knows Tamil. So neer kattis were the ones who are managing the irrigation ponds in the various villages. Now, after independence, and I'm not blaming anybody here, after independence all became centralized. Public Works Department was managing. So once you remove the local governance, then it became an issue of somebody deciding without understanding the local circumstances. So another example would be the Chennai floods. Now, whether it's true or not, what is understood was that ultimately from one of the major tanks or major sources of water, lakes, that provided water to Chennai, the final decision to release water in stages was left to the chief minister, and the lake got filled up and filled up and filled up, and ultimately they had to release such force that it inundated and devastated the city. So decision making has to be at a much more of a participatory decision making. I talked about it earlier, but your question, I think I probably could answer it in such a way.
My question is the reason of rapid rate of melting of glaciers. Like we can see it through the Majuli Island, the largest river island which is in India, Arunachal Pradesh, is sunk.
As I said, the only solution is to cope up with the climate change. The only thing which can save us from the rapid recession of the glacier is to cope up with the climate change.
Yeah, maybe on the Majuli I can add something. I've been to Majuli. The Brahmaputra created Majuli. I mean, by bringing in all the sediments and the erosion from the mountains, it can also take away. So the issue is, how do you, if you want, given large numbers of people are living there, perhaps Prasidi could go there, do a lot more planting of trees and appropriate vegetation that would at least mitigate some of the erosion of the sandbanks. So there are no easy solutions, but there are approaches that can mitigate, and people can adapt to it. So business as usual is no longer the solution.
We believe that if we are being cruel to nature, the nature is going to be cruel to us. And we all are aware of the fact that water is a necessity. And despite knowing that, we are wasting and polluting it on a global level. So I want any of the panelists to put forward a brief message regarding importance of water and what, according to you, should be the price of water bottles in front of you, keeping in consideration the scarcity of it. Thank you, sir.
Well, when we say about the water tariffs throughout the world and throughout India, I think India
first responsibility are we have as a community, as a social leader, as a political activist, or as a peace builder to talk about it, give awareness, whether it's a university, whether it's a college or a school. So the responsibility lies us as a missionary first.
Let me add what Daniel said from a different point of view. In terms of water usage, India is amongst the lowest users per capita. And even within India, the per capita usage of the middle and upper classes is 3 to 4 times higher than the poorer classes. So when you say if you increase the price of water, for example in Tamil Nadu, the access to water per capita is 40 liters per day per person in the lower classes, which is seen as much less than what a person would need for a decent living. The richer ones might pay 100, might use 100 to 200 liters, take a shower, whatever it is. So when you talk about pricing, yes, clearly price can act as a signal, as a mechanism, but I think just like in electricity, a minimum quantity should be made available irrespective, let's say especially for those who have affordability issues. And as you go beyond, so it means piped water, metered water, and so on. So if you go beyond a certain amount, then the prices will start increase, and that mechanism should enable people to conserve.
I think it has some kind of trade-off has to come up, like it's not the optimum application of these insecticides and pesticides such that it doesn't really affect the water quality. That is one way of looking at it. Another way is probably looking at some of the organic solutions in the organic agriculture, how to solve these problems without, how to solve the problem of pests and insects without affecting the water quality or the environment as such would be some of the solutions that we need to look for.
Maybe I can add, since pesticides affect pollinators a lot, I've been involved in many pesticide studies, and in Europe we have several mechanisms to protect also the water bodies. For instance, we have farmers need to have some buffer zones to water bodies so that you don't come as close. We still have pollution, unfortunately, but maybe it's a way of reducing the impact to have a buffer to any river or lake. And European Union wants to reduce the pesticide use by 50% in 2030, so that's an amazing goal. But as you also said, farmers, if you want to produce food, it's sometimes needed to use pesticides, but maybe with some technical solution like precision farming and so on, we can also reduce the use of pesticides and therefore also reduce the effects on the water bodies. And monitoring is also very important, because often we don't know what's out there, we don't know what's in the water bodies, and if we don't know that, we can't relate it to the effects that we see.
Yeah, let me add, this is an inspiring story from Rachel Carson. Have you heard of Rachel Carson? From the 1960s. She wrote the seminal book called Silent Spring. She was vilified by the corporates in the US. The chemicals, the PCBs that went into the lakes and killed the lakes. But subsequently it was determined she was correct, and that led to the Clean Water Act of 1972. Now, so what it means is there has to be a political will. Political will, good scientific data, and then coming up with alternatives. If we do that, clearly there's a solution. For every challenge there's a solution, provided there's a political will, there are good institutional mechanisms, there's credible data to back it up, and resources need to be put in. And I'm not saying it's impossible, but all these things have to come in together like a perfect storm.
And what I think is also very interesting from a pollinator point of view is that we now
Thank you, Dr. G. Balachandar. So we have now reached the conclusion of this fourth panel discussion. It was a brainstorming session in which basically the panelists were there and then we had our own question answer session. So there was some audio problem. We apologize for that. And then, so before we conclude, there is a small function, felicitation ceremony. So I would request our Honorable Vice Chancellor Professor Nilafar Khan to come onto the dais. Thank you. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, sir. Now I would request Dr. Julia Osterman from University of Gothenburg, Sweden, to come onto the front. Now I would request Dr. Shruti Singh from Sharda University, UP. I would request our Dean Students Welfare, Dr. Anisha Shafi, to come onto the stage. I would request Shri Khalid Jahangir to come forward. Chairman ICPS Srinagar. I would request Dr. Vamshi Krishna Baba. So, moment for Dr. Rais Malik, the rapporteur for this session. Kindly stay on the stage for a group photograph with the book. We are all in the felicitation ceremony. Thank you very much.